Hi there guys, welcome to another one of my videos. I'm going to explain to you how we store fat or why we store fat, and try and clear up some of the common misconceptions and try to teach you basically how to get rid of it, how to get rid of fat stores. So the first thing that I want to explain is to go into sort of use a bit of an analogy as to a car. So if you imagine that you've got a car that every time you fill up with fuel, half the fuel is going into the overflow system. And the overflow system you can't actually use, you can't access that fuel, so it's just going into a storage component that then can't be used up as any fuel. So if it keeps going over to that overflow system, you're going to start to ask questions and wonder why. Now, what you would then do is take it to the garage, get them to check it, and then once they've checked it, they'd hand you back the keys and say, okay, that's it, all fixed. When asking what the problem is, they tell you that it's because you're putting too much fuel into the car. So they're saying to you that every time you put fuel into the car, you now have to half fill your tank, and that's how it is. This is a brand new car, and you're not happy with this answer, which means that you're going to have to keep going to the fuel station, putting in just half a tank of fuel every time, when everybody else can quite happily just fill their tanks up to the brim. It's absolutely ridiculous, and you wouldn't accept the answer. You would in fact tell the garage that that's not an answer, all you're doing is avoiding the problem. Okay? Compare this with the human body. Whenever we start to gain weight, we're told to eat less and do more exercise. We're basically saying by that, avoid the problem. Okay? If you do more exercise, you expend more energy, so you burn off a little more. If you eat less, then you're not going to consume the food that's making you put on weight in the first place. If you come to me and say, I'm overweight, what do? And I tell you to eat less food, I'm basically throwing my hands up in the air and saying, I haven't got a clue what it is that makes you fat, but if you don't eat food, then you can't put weight on. Which would sound reasonable, but it's not practical to go without food. And nobody should be expected to go without food or to possibly even lower their calorie intake. If your body's asking for the extra calories, there's a reason for that. And the bigger we get, the more calories we need to consume. So imagine somebody really tall. Someone really tall is going to be consuming far more calories than somebody really small. Okay? That's logic. So then somebody who's really big the other way, obese, someone who's really obese is consuming more calories than somebody who's really slim. Okay? It's logic that you're going to consume more calories. You need more calories because you have more fat cells, you have more body tissue, you have more to keep working. The question is, why do you start storing as fat, and what do you do about it? How do you get it to burn off? What foods directly cause you to gain weight? Okay, and that's what I'm going to look at here and try and explain that to you, and hopefully get to the bottom of it. One of the biggest causes, I believe, is stress, and that's what changes our hormonal balance in the first place. Having said that, when we look back years and years and years ago, let's say war times people were still suffering with stress. So stress was a massive factor, but people weren't obese, okay? And there was around about 10% obesity during the war. So that's pretty substantial. Now, some of the things that I looked at is we exercised more, yeah. Women would be staying at home with the children and wouldn't be going to war. So you can't say that everybody was exercising more. So now we have gyms, we have boot camps, we have fitness retreats, we have holidays that you can go on to keep fit, cycling holidays. There's a lot that we have now access to that they didn't back then. So using exercise, personally, I don't think that exercise is what's caused obesity. Yes, it will help you to burn off calories, so it will help you in aiming to lose weight, and so reducing your calories help you to lose weight. But it is not the answer to why you put it on in the first place, and that's what we're trying to cure. Because if we can do that, then we can hopefully take a few of those things out of the diet and never put them back in, preferably. Okay? If we never put them back in, we'll never go back to being fat. Okay? When we talk about just reducing overall calories, how long can you reduce overall calories? Okay? There's going to become a point in time where reducing overall calories isn't enough. Okay, and we've got to look at the key things that make you gain weight. So here's what I'm going to look at. There's a diagram here for you. So in this diagram, just to explain what we've got the stomach here. So obviously where all the food comes into and then gets taken out into the bloodstream. So this is the bloodstream section down here. Over this side, we've got your fat cells. So this is where fat will sit and store. And then we've got glycogen cells here. Now glycogen is where sugar holds. So glycogen, glucose it will break down into, but when it stores as what's called glycogen. Okay, so when that breaks down, it goes into the bloodstream, gets used up as energy in the bloodstream by flowing around and our bodies demanding that as fuel. Up here we've got the liver, so this is where basically our body can change pretty much anything into something else. The liver is fascinating at what it can change, but that's there. And then we've got the pancreas releasing insulin at the top there. And they're the things that we're going to look at in this as to why we're getting weight. So when we eat, let's say that we're eating sugary products, so they'll be coming into our bloodstream like this. This is our digestive system, so it's coming in like this in bits. Now they come in like this, and this is sugar form, carbohydrates. So when I name sugars, I'm talking about sugars, I'm talking about carbohydrates. All a carbohydrate is something that started as a refined sugar as a plant, and then through photosynthesis developed into a carbohydrate. So they're one of the same group. Carbohydrate and sugar, we're gonna lock those together and just keep talking about those two components. So carbohydrate and sugar, as that flows into the bloodstream, like this, comes into your bloodstream. Now what would happen in a good functioning body is the sugar would then go over into your glycogen cells, and it would store in here as energy. So whenever our body then demands physical energy, that's what we start to expend. So let's say we're doing an hour's worth of exercise, we're going to need some of this glycogen. And for someone like myself that's a personal trainer, I'm regularly doing exercise classes, so I'm regularly using my glycogen cells to fuel that energy with, to fuel that class with. So it goes over into here, then when it's getting released, it will come back into our blood cells and then uphold in there. Okay, what happens is that for some people they'll be having too much carbohydrates and sugars. Now by too much, you'd be surprised how little carbohydrates and sugars we actually need. Okay, for example, our body can only hold 2,000 calories of carbohydrate and sugars. Now that sounds like quite a lot at first, but when you look at in the refined forms that we get them in, it's actually not very much at all. Cake and things like that would have excessive amount of calories in. You could easily do it in one sitting, have your 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. Now, the ones that you want to avoid carbohydrate-wise are refined carbohydrates. They're the real nasty ones. And the reason for avoiding them, as it comes into your bloodstream, goes into your digestive system here, and they're very small components, so they're usually singular sugars, very simple, called simple sugars. Okay, so simple sugars come into your bloodstream. When simple sugars come in, what happens is it lumps the sugar into your bloodstream very, very quickly because there's nothing to break down. So it gets in there very rapidly. Now when simple sugars get in, insulin, the job of insulin is to control your blood sugar level. Okay, so it releases insulin. Now the more sugar you eat, and we're talking about sugars and carbs, so we're talking rice, pasta, chips, potato, crisps, biscuits, chocolate, refined sugars like sweets, fruits is a very simple sugar, yogurt has lactose, milk has lactose, so there's loads of different things in there, cereals, porridge, we're looking at all these different things. So if you just think about your daily intake of sugar and carbohydrates, it's huge. When you start to write down what's got sugars in, it actually becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So as these sugars come in, insulin then works to control these blood sugars. Now the way it works to control them is releasing insulin out of the pancreas, and then sugar is then carried over into your liver. Now the job of the liver is then to convert this into a fat and store. So it converts into what we call a triglyceride, okay, which is 3 different parts to fat with a glycerol. So they bind themselves together and lock together there. Now the problem with triglycerides is that they can't fit through your ATP, so your where you burn up energy as fuel. These triglycerides are too big, they're too thick to get through the filters to be used as energy. So the only way we can use them as energy is to start breaking them down. Okay, so if we break these down, then one fatty deposit at a time. Remember, there's 3 because it's a triglyceride, so there's 3 fatty deposits to be used. Once they're broken down, they can then be used up as energy. Okay? Now I'll show you where the big problem is. If insulin is secreting, if it's pumping out insulin, then what happens is there's a hormone called HSL, hormone sensitive lipase. Now if HSL is low, then it can't break down these triglycerides. That's what you need to keep high, okay? When insulin is high, its direct response is to lower your HSL level, okay? So the higher the insulin goes, i.e. the more sugar you eat, one, the more sugar you store as fat, two, you can't then break down those fatty deposits because the HSL level has then lowered, okay? I hope that makes sense. At the moment, if you get confused, you can always just write a message on the bottom and then I'll respond to that and try and help you. But this is the cause of us getting obese, that these fatty cells just keep adding up and adding up and adding up, okay? And it's almost a ridiculous comment saying eat less and you'll get slim, because that is literally just trying to avoid the problem. Okay, the problem is that you've got a hormone imbalance. To get the hormones balanced, you need to cut down your sugar and carbohydrate intake in order to rebalance your hormones. Stress is a massive, massive factor, and I could spend an hour just talking to you about stress and how that relates to it. So just in short, just so that I don't have to go all through that right now, for stress, you need to make sure that you're not working up late, that you're getting plenty of sleep, at least 8 hours a night. So you need to make sure you're switching off your laptop, you're switching off your phones later on at night, maybe 9 o'clock. Allow your brain to start settling down. Switch the lights off. Let your body realise that it's night time and things are starting to calm now, ready for you to go and have a good night's sleep. Make sure that you're socialising with friends, whether that be physical activity or whether that just be going out to have fun with your friends. Make sure you do that. It's really, really important for your stress levels. And if you can keep your stress levels under control, you're more likely to keep your hormones stable. Okay, but once the hormones become unstable, you start to crave bad foods, being sugar and carbohydrates. Okay, so think about it. The next time that you have a bad day, you're going to be reaching for those bad foods. Think about that. It's never the good quality foods. It's never chicken. It's never eggs. It's never salmon that you're going to reach for when you're having a bad day. It's always the carbohydrates, and there's a reason for it. Okay, it's because your stress levels have unsettled your hormones. Then you're craving more carbohydrates. You're putting those in, and they're causing you to gain weight. Okay, so the only way back is to get the carbohydrates out of your system. So doing without them in your diet as much as you can. I would recommend about 30 to 40 grams per day of complex carbohydrates. So by that I'm talking about maybe couscous would be a good carbohydrate. Remember, there's carbohydrates in vegetables too. I'd recommend only one piece of fruit a day and try and make it high in fibre, like an apple. Okay, the reason for the high fibre content is it releases sugar back into your bloodstream slower than it would without the fibre. Also aids digestion, so it means that you're using that food up far more efficiently, far better. Okay, it's all about stabilising your hormones. Okay, and if anybody tells you just eat less and do more exercise, they're throwing their hands up and saying, I haven't got a clue what's causing you to be overweight, but surely if you eat less food, that will solve it. Yes, you'll lose a few pounds for sure. Okay, you may even lose a couple of stone by doing that, but it doesn't answer the question of why did you get fat in the first place? Why did you eat more calories than you needed? They're the questions to be answered, okay? And I hope that this has helped you to answer some of those questions. Cheers, guys.